Hello, and welcome to Longwood GradCast Beyond the Degree. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah Tanner Anderson, Assistant Dean of the College of Graduate and Professional Studies. This season, we're exploring one big question: how did you get here? Join us as we uncover the inspiring, winding, and sometimes unexpected paths of Longwood University's graduate alumni, students, and faculty. Whether you're dreaming of your next step, reflecting on your journey, or just curious about the stories behind remarkable success, this podcast is your inside look at the transformative power of education, determination, and the Longwood spirit. Let's dive in. Welcome back, everyone. I am so excited to introduce Devin Kaiser as our next guest for Season 2 of Longwood GradCast Beyond the Degree. Hi, Devin. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to get to talk to you guys today.
Well, we are super excited to have you today. And as you might know, this season we're exploring the idea of how did you get here with our alumni and their career paths. So to start, what initially drew you to Longwood University?
So my mom is actually an alumni of Longwood University. Actually, it is kind of funny. All throughout when I was a child, I was like, I will not be going in the same path as my mom. I will not be a teacher. I will not go to Longwood. I very much ate my words on that one. Of course, I ended up actually finding out I was like, I really enjoy a smaller school. I really enjoy Longwood. When I went to visit, I had only visited two schools, one much, much larger university and then Longwood. And I just immediately was like, this is where I need to be. This is the school for me. I was wrong. I definitely, like I said, ate my words on that one. But the small feel, being so close to all my professors, getting to just really engross myself into the campus life was really big.
Longwood sure does feel like home. I would agree with that. So what made you choose to pursue your undergraduate and your master's degree in special education from Longwood?
So I actually, throughout high school, I was in the Governor's School for the Arts performing. I sang opera for 4 years. That's something that some people know about me, but not everybody does. And for the first about 3 years of being in that program, I was like, I'm going to be an opera singer. I am going to do this professionally. That's all I wanted to do. As I said, I didn't want to follow always the same path as my mom, who is a fifth grade teacher. And then the end of my junior year came and I was kind of thinking about the things that I was interested in. And I was like, I love performing. It's great, but I have a very small voice when it comes to what you need for an operatic singing career. And I was like, I get sick pretty easily. It just doesn't seem like it's going to be a career path for me. So of course I had that like little bit of time where I was like, what am I going to do with my life? Of course, then at that point, I was like, well, my mom's a teacher. I've always taught with her. I've gone into her classroom. I've done plenty of lessons with her. I've done a fairly good job at that. So I ended up actually being able to join a class my senior year, our adaptive PE class. So I ended up making friends with a bunch of kids in there, and we were helping them and working with them. And it was all students with disabilities from actually a program that I got involved in that summer after called CSEP. So I was like, this is perfect. Shout out to my high school principal, Miss Atkinson. She is the reason I ended up in that class. And I'm so grateful because I did make so many connections in there that ended up really influencing my entire kind of life career at this point.
I love that. And I love how sometimes the most unexpected things can change your trajectory entirely.
Absolutely.
So, how did your experiences here at Longwood shape your approach to education and your community engagement?
So, of course, Longwood, one of the things is being, of course, a citizen leader. And one of the things that I really took away from that was that teachers are some of the biggest citizen leaders. We're working with the public in such a way that is not always appreciated, but is always so important. One of the things that a lot of people see is they see students with disabilities and sometimes they think of the deficits rather than all of the amazing things that they can do. And of course, with that, we definitely, as a special education teacher, I specifically wanted my students to engage in more outside of the classroom, that I wanted them to work on their citizen leadership, on the community engagement piece, because ultimately, if they're just in the classroom all the time and I'm not actually bringing them out and, getting them acquainted with the rest of the population, what are we doing? And of course, with being in a inclusion setting, one of the things is being with your general education peers. And some of my students were really great at that. You would never know any difference. But some of my students, of course, working with that and getting them on track to just be able to integrate into that community. So Longwood definitely taught me a lot about that, especially all of my professors. They were very big on making sure that we knew it's not necessarily a lack of something when it comes to the disabled population. It's usually there's a lot of attributes that are really fabulous about them and that we take for granted sometimes as neurotypical people.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing a little bit about how Longwood shaped you and your approach in the classroom setting. And you mentioned a little bit about the professors. So, were there any specific professors or mentors or maybe even experiences here at Longwood that really influenced your path?
Absolutely. So I can immediately think of my professors in the special education department, of course. Dr. Khan was one of my advisors, and he was always very hard on us in the best way possible. He was exactly what I needed at that time. Being a college student, we had to really live up to our expectations and his expectations of us. He knew what we were all capable of. But even Dr. Jones, he was one of my professors. He actually went to high school with my stepfather and knows my mom very well. So getting that kind of like one-on-one interaction with him, knowing him, and Dr. Alves and Dr. Feathers, of course, they were some of my favorites, some of my favorite professors in the entire world. I loved getting to learn from them and get to take the knowledge from them. They were so important in shaping what I was able to do as an educator in my time in the classroom. They were some of the most important parts of that.
That's fantastic. And we do have some pretty amazing professors. I have to say, my colleagues are incredible here. And so you mentioned the faculty, you mentioned the mentorship, the connections, the relationships that you built with your professors. Was there a memorable experience you had here or in the 2 years that you've been teaching in the classroom that really just kind of shines a light on why you love being a special education teacher?
So actually, I was thinking about this question a lot because one of the things is I was like, what were some of my best moments in the classroom? And I would say any interaction with my students were always like my favorite parts. Of course, we had our hard days and we had our difficult days, but especially even in the difficult days, I just really appreciated. I had one student that really, he continues to be one that I think about up until now and that I still, being out of the classroom, I sincerely miss him and hope that he's doing well. But he would come to us and he was so willing to share everything that was going on in his life. And he was going through a lot of difficult things. And being able to be kind of a sounding board for him and a sounding board for any of my students, having those close relationships because of the ones that were mirrored to me during college, during high school, during all those formative years, I was able to take back all of those things that I had learned about how to be an approachable and understanding teacher and bring it to all of those conversations. So I would just say any of these conversations, these deep conversations that I got to have with my students that even now some of my former students still reach out and still we have constant communication. My first year teaching students are all going to be seniors next year in high school, which there a couple of them have reached out. I'm sending graduation tickets and things like that. And I just kind of know I'm like, this is what matters. This is why we do what we do. It's the not the instant gratification all the time because you don't always see it immediately, but the gratification of knowing that you've changed a life really.
And those good experiences turn into good days that turn into, just life-changing pathways for your students. I think that's such a beautiful thing that you're receiving invitations for graduations and to watch them grow. It's beautiful and empowering. And so you mentioned that you are no longer in the classroom. And so I'm wondering what led to your transition from teaching into your current role, which just sounds so cool, but your current role at the Virginia Air and Space Science Center.
Yes. So my 2 years in the classroom were so wonderful, and I really enjoyed engaging with the students and being with my students. But I definitely did start to, unfortunately, experience a little bit of that teacher burnout for a bit. It was very difficult, of course, coming into a school that is so established and being the newbie, being the youngest teacher there. So I did have a little bit of a struggle of balancing that. And I just kind of was like, okay, this job truly fell in my lap in a way because I was looking, but not very seriously. It was one of those, if I can try something else and see something else that's still in the realm of education, but more in the informal realm, let's see what there is out there. But if there's not, I'd be happy to come back to the classroom and enjoy time with more students. This job absolutely fell in my lap. I actually applied for a different job here, and my boss, Danielle, actually kind of pitched this entire job to me and was like, I actually have you in mind for something else that we haven't coming up, and I think you'd be the right fit for. And now I've been here almost 2 years, and I'm loving it and loving the work that I get to do here. But it came from something kind of upsetting. I felt very sad leaving the classroom, but it was also the right choice at the right time. And I still do eventually see myself maybe going back and still working with students, because that is something that I do miss on a daily basis. I get to work with students in a more informal setting, but I do miss some of the long-term relationships that I get to build in the classroom, being with them for a full year.
I can certainly understand that. But now you're the STEM projects lead at the Virginia Air and Space Science Center. So tell us a little bit about what that role looks like and what excites you about that role.
Absolutely. I get to work with any of our STEM projects that come out. So my biggest project right now is my STEM Connect project that I'm working on. It's a NASA STEM literacy and community enrichment project. And we are working with teachers, we are working with schools, we're working with libraries, because one of the things that a lot of people don't think about with STEM is literacy. They don't think about the kids that maybe aren't as interested in STEM, but they're really interested in reading, and getting to them in that way and forming a relationship and a positive correlation between STEM through literacy. So that's one of my biggest projects. And of course, I work on a lot of other things here and there as well. I enjoy, of course, putting on STEM events and things of that sort. And with STEM Connect, we do STEM events each year. And then we also, each year of the project, we did 5 last year, 6 this year. We actually have one last one coming up next weekend that I'm very excited for. It's our Engineering and Women's History Month event. We bring in partners from all different areas of STEM that specifically correlate to the specific theme of the event of that day. And they bring STEM activities. We offer 500 free admissions through this grant that we got. And it's a really fun day. We, of course, also partner. We have the library coming to this one. We have another organization called Reach that does a lot of outreach for students at their center, and they give out free books the entire time. And I've gotten to work with a couple of authors. Actually, one fun one is Andrea Beatty, who wrote Rosie Revere Engineer and The Ada Twist Scientist. She's coming to our next one. Super excited to have her, just very grateful. She is a wonderful woman. I cannot speak any more highly of her. She pulled it out for us and is going to be there. But aside from just the STEM events that we do for STEM Connect, we also did 92 schools. We gave 20 different STEM-themed library books to each school. It was all Title I schools in the area. That was a huge undertaking, especially as my first task in the project last year, but it was so much fun getting to see, and I have so many notes from librarians about how important the books have been and how much they appreciated them, because they don't always get just donations of brand new hardcover books. Because that was one of the things that I definitely, being in education, I was like, we have to have hardcover books. That's a big one, knowing that they're just less likely to get ripped up and things like that. Because, of course, when you get a good book in the hands of kids, you want it to have a little wear and tear, but you want it to be able to withstand. And then this year, we were able to create curriculum surrounding the children's book, Hidden Figures, The True Story for Black Women in the Space Race by Margot Lee Shetterly. One of the lesser known facts is that a lot of the Hidden Figures had their start here in Hampton at NACA before it was NASA. And of course, being a part of, we are the official visitor center of NASA Langley Research Center. That was a huge thing that we wanted to highlight. And we wanted to highlight this book because there were also so many activities we were able to do that connected to the themes of the book. So we were able to roll out curriculum and provide supplies for up to 30 students per teacher to 65 teachers who ended up signing up for that professional development, got to lead professional development for the first time. It's been a really whirlwind of past almost 2 years, and I just enjoy it so much. I enjoy getting to see so many people take advantage of our events. We have some families that come back every single time because we added a pin component, kind of like Disney has their trading pins. We have our own special trading pins. We do a different design for each one. And just seeing the children and their families come back, getting to have a new experience each time and get to experience these things all for free, thanks to the grant that we have. has been really exciting. I absolutely just love this project, and I'm going to be sad when it ends. It is coming to an end since it's a 2-year, but excited to see what will happen afterwards and where we can go with the ideas and the things that we've already started doing.
Absolutely. And to hear your passion about these projects, it's contagious. I'm excited about it. I want to jump in my car right now and come visit you. And so initially, it seems like, STEM education and maybe teaching in the field of special education might feel like two completely different worlds. But it sounds like you've been able to connect that work and your passion with working with a variety of people in a variety of different ways. So I guess I'm interested in what's been your biggest learning curve from a traditional school environment to a more informal educational setting?
Getting to have total just fun with it. In the classroom, of course, I was always one that I always was trying to have fun with the lessons. But of course, there's going to be lessons that just you're not going to be able to have as much fun with them because it's just you have to get the subject, you have to get it taught, you have to get it at mastery, you have to get it there. You lose some of that sometimes in the formal education setting just because of how quick your pacing has to go, because of how quick your curriculum has to go, and because of course we have state testing. One of the things that we get to do a lot in informal ed is we joke that we get to kind of come in and be the fun extra lesson. I've gotten to do actually some lessons for my former school that I taught at. I've been able to do some virtual lessons and virtual teaching for them, which has been really fun. And I'm really grateful that I've gotten to do that because getting to be kind of the fun teacher that comes in and does this fun science lesson that's also very educational and all tied to the Virginia Standards of Learning. But it's one of those things, my biggest learning curve was just learning to be able to just have fun with it. Also, learning a lot of the science. I'll be honest, I kind of came in and I was always that kid who really enjoyed reading. My mom's a reading teacher, has been for years. STEM was not something, for a little bit it interested me in late middle school, but it was never this big passion for me. And so coming here and learning more about it, learning more about NASA, being so ingrained in knowing what NASA does, because of course that is part of it. And especially I take on an educator role every now and again for some of our programs when we need one. I've gotten to learn so much more information. And now I'm STEM is so interesting. So just learning some of those concepts has probably been the most difficult, but most rewarding because now I know what I'm talking about. I know what I can teach, and it's very fun to teach it and inspire other kids to get into STEM, even if maybe they are a bookworm, even if they are into a different subject. It's STEM is still accessible to you. It's still very fun, still very interesting, and there's a way to connect it.
So I think you mentioned a couple of different things that I'd love to unpack with you. I think, the representation in STEM, that literacy component, also making STEM accessible to all students, and particularly those in Title I schools. And so I'd be interested to know, you mentioned STEM Connect and the work that you've been doing with STEM Connect. You've also mentioned a couple of other different projects that you've been working on, but what have you found to be a really successful way or a successful approach to make STEM accessible for your diverse learners? So let's start there, particularly with your Title I schools. What work has that looked like?
Absolutely. One of the things is just having the materials accessible. Where a lot of the issue comes from in Title I schools is, of course, you're working with a limited amount of funding. You do get some of that funding just from being a Title I school, but teachers are often having to dig into their own pockets. I know I did as a teacher so often in order to provide fun, engaging experiences to my kids. And that was something that always, especially once I heard about this project and I knew that I was going to be involved in it, one of the things that was so important was it was if we want them to do these activities through STEM Connect, we should supply all of the supplies. It was a really big undertaking because, of course, the education team here is very small. So it was an all hands on deck experience to create large totes of just supplies and supplies. And one of the things that we heard from a lot of those teachers that did sign up for getting our curriculum and who got those supplies was they were like, thank you so much. I don't get the chance to do things like this because of the financial strain. And of course, you think about it and you're like, okay, some cotton balls and water bottles, not too expensive, but once you're doing it for a classroom of 30, or say you're a teacher who switches classes and you have 5 sets of 30 students, that gets really expensive. So I think that lowering that barrier was very important, just the accessibility of it. And of course, then for more diverse learners, we've had a lot of teachers that are also using it in like special education classrooms, like where I came from, and having hands-on activities are really important. Also, because you may be able to teach it in a way that a hands-on learner may really enjoy, and that if they're getting that hands-on component, they might understand it just that little bit more. And I found that very often to be the case in my own teaching and learning. So that's been a really big thing with STEM Connect, is just trying to make it as accessible to all the teachers that signed up, as well as anyone who comes to our events and things like that. We just really want them to be able to enjoy STEM as much as possible.
I think that accessibility piece is so huge in many of our schools. Funding remains an issue, access to different fun activities. And I love the idea of you're the fun additional lesson. What an awesome thing. What a great charge, right? You get to come in there and just swoop in and have so much fun. So I'm sure the students love it. I'm sure the teachers appreciate it. You mentioned the accessibility, you mentioned STEM Connect, and I kind of just want to go back and talk a little bit more about a different project that you talked about. So you've mentioned literacy and connecting different elements of literacy in your work. And one of your focus areas is Hidden Figures, the true story of 4 Black women in the space race. And so I'd love for you to tell me a little bit about why this story is so important to share with students, how it's resonating with your students, because you did mention the geographic component and how neat it is to know that these women were really just in the neighborhood, right? Right down the street from where many of these students are studying. So why is it so important to share this story with our students today?
So, of course, with everything kind of going on in the world, one of the things that we really care about and we want them to see is you want students to be able to see themselves in a story and in something that happened in real life. A lot of people, they saw the film, maybe didn't even realize that a lot of the things that they were talking about were happening right here in Hampton. Of course, our students are all learning about that component, but also learning about these are 4 women who really were the backbone of some of the beginnings of NACA and the beginnings of NASA, really, because of the fact that they were behind the scenes. They were not always at the forefront. They weren't always the ones touted for their contributions. So one of the things that's really big, and actually one of the hidden figures, Christine Darden, she is a former board member. And so she is so fantastic. And we actually have her reading the story in our literacy center. And so it's so important for students just be able to see themselves in the work and see themselves represented, because so often representation is one of those things that some stories lack. And of course, STEM sometimes lacks, is we want to be able to, and one of the things that has been really at the forefront of STEM education is showing other populations, showing a diverse amount of learners. So we have the first Black man going to space, going to the moon with the Artemis mission and with Victor Glover. And it's so interesting to see. And we have the first woman going to the moon with Christina Cook in the Artemis mission. So it's so interesting to see that because of these 4 Black women who started the program, the 4 hidden figures that all kind of began the change and work and kind of dealt with the things of the time and still stuck it out and were able to make such huge advancements that we're still using today to inform our own missions and what NASA is doing. Getting to see that kind of culminate into now the Artemis mission is so interesting. So it's just really important for students to be able to just see that and see that some of them came from maybe not so great backgrounds, or some of them, they always need to see people that look like them and people that act like them, people that are their own kind, that are their people. And so it's really exciting to get to create activities that go with that and give them these books and give them these resources that all connect back to these themes of the Hidden Figures book. It's just really awesome to see how we are able to show diversity through that in STEM.
I think that is awesome. And I'm wondering if you've seen a shift at all in your young students, especially perhaps girls and students of color, seeing themselves represented in these stories. Have you noticed any kind of a change over the 2 years that you've been in this work?
So, just from hearing from a lot of our teachers that did receive, because they also received a 30 copy set of these books for their classrooms. And a lot of them have sent me pictures of their students reading these books. And so for the majority, I have seen, especially a lot of the teachers have been using them with clubs like Ladies of Distinction, with their students in Girls in STEM or Women in STEM clubs. So it's been really cool to see that has been something that has come from this, that a lot of these teachers, they're not only using the supplies and the activities with their classrooms, but they're also going out into the community and using them with like community groups that they're involved in. And they're using them with other clubs throughout their school that are engaging girls in STEM. Because that is one of the areas that, of course, we've had a lot of breakthroughs. We've had a lot of women that have joined the workforce in STEM. However, still making sure that we continue those things in those pathways is really important, of course.
That is so cool. And I love the idea of expanding that work into the community and through different organizations and people benefiting from amazing resources, but also opportunities for discussion and conversation and engagement surrounding these issues. So I'm wondering if there are ways, you mentioned the idea of representation, particularly for women and girls, for students of color. Have you seen that idea of representation applied while you were a special education teacher?
Absolutely. One of the things with special education and with specifically certain areas of special education, I worked with a lot of students specifically with autism spectrum disorder. And one of the things that a lot of the research when I did my undergraduate and in my master's program at Longwood, one of the things that I became really interested in is the amount of women that are now coming forward and finding out that they have autism. They are autistic. And it's been so interesting to see how the research is adjusting because for many years, some of the research was all tailored to original research done with little boys. The diagnostic criteria for so long was all rooted in that original research, with very little being done on women, on little girls. And the two, definitely girls and boys for sure, they present very differently with their symptoms when they are getting diagnosed with autism. So that's one area that I feel like is really happening and really coming up is there's more conversations around neurodiversity in women and women in neurodiversity in neurodiverse spaces, which has been really interesting. It's an area that I'm really interested in just on my own and just in general, but seeing also within my classroom, seeing the uptick of I had a lot of girls that were maybe struggling with these things and didn't understand it and didn't feel like they were always seen, but being able to provide them, resources to see other girls and women like them that are just as successful, just as living their lives, doing great things, being able to see themselves in other women is so interesting because it does sometimes in the disability community, I do feel like it sometimes feels isolating, especially as a woman. I'm someone who has ADHD specifically. So I very strongly connect with that in the neurodiverse community and everything. And it is one of those things that you look at and it's interesting now as compared to even when I was in middle school, first finding out, getting my diagnosis of ADHD, and now seeing how much more there is on all these social media platforms.
Well, thank you for sharing that because I do think representation matters across the board. And so it's interesting to hear how you've experienced it both in the education setting as a special education teacher and also in that informal education setting in the work that you do now. So, looking back over the span of the past few years, has your definition of success evolved since graduating from Longwood?
I would say absolutely. When I was graduating, I definitely saw success as kind of just a getting through the school year. If I can just get all of my students through, have them pass, have them do well, that was my definition of success then. And even in my first 2 years of teaching, it was important to me for them to learn all the things that they needed to learn and get them ready for the next grade level. But I didn't have much going further from there. I saw success as the end of the year of, okay, have I done my due diligence of getting them where they need to go? Are they moving on? Are they being held back? Is there any of that? So my definition of success was very like based on each school year. Whereas now it's so much more long term. I couldn't always see outside of the classroom during my time as an educator. And now, of course, one day if I do decide to go back and into the classroom, I think that my definition of success has changed wildly from being outside of it and in the informal setting, because there's so much more that you can do as a teacher. And there's so much more that I can be involved in outside of just the classroom that is so important to my success as a teacher. So my definition of success now, of course, is it's thinking 5, 6, 7 years into the future. It's thinking, okay, how am I going to impact their lives further out? And I was worried about impacting their lives further out as a teacher, but it was so different. It was like the burnout, of course, getting to you. It happened very quickly because it was like get to the end of the school year. And I know so many teachers will resonate with that like we care about the outcome and we want to see our students succeed long term, but sometimes you're just only thinking about, okay, let's just get through the year. Now it's like I just have such a grander definition of success of just I want it to be long term, not just this short term goal of just getting through.
What skills do you think that you gleaned from your time as a teacher that maybe have been surprisingly valuable to you in your current role?
Definitely the paperwork side of special education has become very helpful, which has been the funniest thing. Writing IEPs and these things, it definitely is something. I actually just worked on a grant recently. And one of the things, because I do every now and again get to work on grants, of course, and put my input into them in this role for future STEM projects. And I was working on one recently, and it was so funny that I had to write objectives and I had to write goals. And I was like, oh, I know how to do this. This is so easy. And it was so funny because those are the things that you don't always think about coming from teaching, because so many teachers do kind of sell themselves short of, well, I'm never going to get out of the classroom because this skill will never just transfer over to the workforce. And I can say for sure, my many skills of being a teacher have transferred so well into my career now and into working in a different environment. Data keeping, data tracking, all those things that I learned as a special education teacher and learned in my time at Longwood, all of those things have really influenced how I am now, because I am able to keep with having a project. You're having to keep data all the time. I was so excited, I was like, yay, I don't have to write an IEP for a little while. That'll be so nice. I'm still loving it and still using that skill so regularly in my time as STEM projects lead. I've been using it very fairly regularly, but even classroom management, I use that all the time as well. It's funny, the amount of things that I can bring to this environment being a former teacher has been really interesting, because not always do people outside of education think of like just the small things that teachers have to think about every single day. You may not realize as someone outside of education. So bringing that to my team has also been really helpful.
I think that's fascinating. And I guess I'm interested if there's someone out there who, has considered a career change, but they're not really sure. Maybe they're a little hesitant about taking that leap. What advice would you give to them?
You have all the skills necessary. A lot of times when I was thinking about leaving, one of the things that always got me stuck was things like LinkedIn. We didn't always learn a ton about that because in education, it's not very regularly used. It is so easy to learn those things. Take the time to invest in yourself and in your own career goals, because as an educator, we don't have to use some of those things. It's fairly not easy, but it is teaching jobs. There are a lot of them because there is such a lack of teachers right now coming into the workforce. So teaching jobs are very readily available. However, it feels so daunting to get out of education because you feel like, well, I've learned how to write an education resume, but how do I write a corporate resume? There's classes on that. There are all sorts of things. I know I specifically used a lot of resources from Teacher Career Coach. That was one that was really helpful to me in my process of leaving the classroom. And all of your skills do transfer. If anything, you have a wide set of skills to transfer from the classroom. And that's something that so many teachers struggle with is, well, I've only ever known the classroom. How do I get out? Whereas a lot of people going into corporate careers from, say, a business degree, they have a little bit more knowledge on that. So that is one space where they come in and it's a little bit more intuitive to them. With teaching teaching has not kind of caught up in some of those ways of using LinkedIn to create connections, writing a corporate resume, things like that that you don't really think about when leaving the classroom suddenly become very big. And it's like, I have no idea where to begin. There's so many resources, so many resources out there. And teachers know how to learn. You know how to teach. You can teach yourself. You can teach yourself anything. And that's so important because that's something that I struggled really heavily with. And I'm grateful that my husband was a business major at Longwood. So he also helped me with a lot of those. So reaching out to also the resources that you have in your corner, there's people that are out there to help you.
Excellent. And so for the people who want to stay in the classroom and keep up the good fight, so I guess give us a little bit of advice for those educators who are in the classroom, who might want to incorporate more STEM engagement in their classrooms. What would that look like and why is that so important?
Your students will enjoy it. Even just doing it a couple of times a year, even if you can do just the first semester, just the second semester, anything like that, and asking for support. That's a big one that I feel like sometimes is difficult, is asking for support, because I know I've been there. I used to be very nervous to ask for support from, higher up and from my principals, from my assistant principals, from those in charge of me, and they'll help you find a way generally. There will be other teachers that may be able to help you figure out how to do it, or maybe you combine efforts and you can do it for a whole grade level. And there's also opportunities out there as far as for funding, looking for programs like STEM Connect that are in the area, taking advantage of them. One of the things that we saw is that a lot of teachers signed up, but maybe didn't end up coming out to our professional development sessions to get their materials. And I was understandably a little bit sad because I was like, you're missing out on such a great opportunity. But also the time commitment. I understand going to a 3-hour professional development on a Saturday is sometimes difficult, but still looking for those professional development opportunities and looking for potential places that will give you a little bit of money. We were able to give stipends to all of our teachers on top of the supplies, looking for programs like ones that we offer at different areas and in different areas of reading and math. In all these organizations, there's so many that are willing to pour into our schools, but we as teachers don't always know that they exist. I've been able to tell some of my friends, hey, you should look into this for helping fund this for your classroom. I've been able to show them some of these things because I think sometimes informal education seems like it's a completely different world than formal education. Really, the two should be working together all the time. And that's one of the things that the Air and Space Science Center that we work on and that we are always trying to do is just connect with community schools. We're always trying to get in the schools. We're trying to find opportunities to bring them here, to give them opportunities that are free to the schools and to the students. I know some of the most memorable lessons for me and for my former students have been the ones that are very hands-on. And some of them have come back and they're like, hey, remember that lesson you taught us with this? I still think about that as a high schooler. In my junior year of high school, I still thought of that lesson. And, you really got me to understand that concept. I'm really grateful. So having those moments, they're really helpful to see your students really enjoy them, even if they may get messy. Sometimes STEM also gets very messy, but it's very fun. Sometimes it's fun to just let them engage in the mess a little bit.
I love that. Engage in the mess a little bit. I think that is excellent advice. And I think we should all do more of that, to be honest.
I agree.
You've come a long way, Devin, since your undergraduate and your graduate degree here at Longwood. I wonder if you might think back if you were able to give yourself some advice to yourself as a Longwood student. What would it be?
Be as involved as you can. My first year at Longwood, I definitely got very involved in so many different things and actually kind of overdid it. And then I pulled back. I was in my sorority. I was in Sigma Kappa, and I enjoyed that experience. But I do wish sometimes now looking back, I'm like, join a couple more things. Do a couple more things. It's the time to do it. Now, of course, I made some really great friendships, and I've actually kept a lot of those friendships throughout. My core group of friends are my friends from Longwood, and I'm very grateful. I actually had dinner with one last night. But I would definitely tell myself, stay engaged, stay involved, stay doing these things, because some of the things that I learned from my time at Longwood and in being involved in different things has been so wildly helpful as I've gotten into my career. it's been so important to see how that citizen leadership portion of everything that goes on at Longwood is so important as just a working adult.
And we do our best to promote citizen leadership, as you well know, here at Longwood across all of our programs. And so I think that's excellent advice to give yourself, to be involved, to do the things. And talking about doing the things, what's next for you? What are you excited about? What's your aspirations? What is Devin doing next?
So I actually am, and it's already everywhere, but so most people who either follow me or know me, I am currently pregnant. So actually, I'm just very, thank you. I am very excited for kind of getting into the whole motherhood thing. I'm currently 25, almost 26 weeks pregnant as we're doing this. So we are actually in the double digits towards her due date. Very excited to meet her, but I'm just very excited to lead into more of that motherhood role and see where that takes me. Of course, still doing my things here, but really lean into motherhood right now. That's my big one. And of course, seeing where my career goes as well. I have so many opportunities here, and I'm just really grateful that I'm given those opportunities. And I'm excited to see what's to come with my career at the Virginia Air and Space Science Center. Just to see what new things we have coming up on the horizon. I know that there's going to be so many great opportunities and ways that we're going to be expanding. So both of those, kind of a personal one and a work-related one, but I'm excited to see where things go.
Well, we are excited to see where things go as well. I am thrilled to hear of a little Lancer in the making. My husband and I also both met here at Longwood, and our son, who's in 5th grade right now, wants to come to Longwood. So perhaps, we've got little Lancer legacies in the making. So that is so exciting. I'm thrilled for you. And also to hear that you continue to grow and work on projects and all that you're doing in the work. We appreciate the work that you do, the connections that you sustain with our educators, the ability to use all that you've learned from Longwood and your experiences here as well. We so appreciate you sharing all of that with us today, Devin. And I just want to thank you so very much for being our guest today. And thank you for continuing the good work.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And I'm excited to see even more people from Longwood coming into informal education and education. It's needed, and Longwood turns out some of the best.
Excellent. Thank you, Devin. We'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Longwood GradCast Beyond the Degree. We hope today's story has left you inspired to reflect on your own path and the steps that brought you here. Remember, every journey starts with a single step, and we are here to support yours. Explore our graduate programs and professional endorsements at longwood.edu/grad programs. And stay tuned for more stories that remind us leadership is in our blood. Is it in yours?